Now that you know how to sew forwards and backwards on your sewing machine, why don't we try and start on some basic seams first. So our most basic seam is the straight seam. What we need to do, I've got two pieces of fabric here, and this is my right side of the fabric, which means this is the side that is printed, the side I want to be seen on the outside. And you can see that's the wrong side of the fabric. For a regular seam, what we want to do is put the edges together with the right sides facing, so the good sides of the fabric facing each other. If you like, you can pin the seam in place. I recommend pinning perpendicular, so as you're sewing, it's very easy to pull your pins out as you go, especially when you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, you might want to pull the pin this way, and so on. Okay. Line up your seam edge, the fabric edge, with the seam width that you want. Let's say you want 1.5 centimeters. You would line it up to 15. Lower your presser foot. Take out your pin. And sew forward. Just a couple of stitches. And then you can go reverse. And you can see on this machine, my reverse button is down here. So I'm pressing it, holding it down. Now I've locked my seam into place. I can continue sewing all the way to the end, keeping this fabric edge aligned with my fabric guide. When you get to the end of the seam, just backstitch another couple of stitches, take your needle out, lift your presser foot, and clip your threads. So you can see you've got the seam allowance of 1.5 centimeters on either side, and your good sides have the seam. So I hate ironing just as much as the next person, but when you sew, you really do want to press as you go. So I'm just going to pop my piece of fabric here, and from the wrong side, I'm ironing my seam flat. So you can see it's nice and flat, and on the other side it looks a lot more nice and finished, especially as you sew across the seam. You want to make sure that you always iron your seams open first. Okay, if I just left this seam like this and then I would maybe make a garment and wear it, the rubbing against the skin and the friction in the washing will actually cause this fabric to unravel. Unless you have knit fabric, you always have to apply some kind of seam finish. One of the most basic seam finishes is using pinking shears. So if you have a look at some of the vintage garments, maybe something from your grandmother or mother, a lot of them would be homemade, and they would be using these pinking shears. And what you can see is that they have ragged zigzag edges. So what you want to do is take your seam allowance, so this is called your seam allowance, and just cut along. Relatively evenly. Now this will give you some protection from the fabric fraying. However, if it is an item that is going to be washed frequently, or that is going to be worn against the body and not lined, you're better off applying perhaps a zigzag stitch or turn. So I'm going to show you how to do that now as well. So you can see this one is pinked. So another very simple way of finishing a seam on your sewing machine is to use a zigzag stitch. So on this machine, my zigzag is number 8. So on my button, I'm going to go to number 8. You can see this is an electronic machine. So what I want to do is determine how wide I want my zigzag to be. In order for this as a default setting, so if you wanted to find out and you're new to your machine, you could just move your hand wheel. Now this one actually locks the seam and goes down 3 times, but your machine most probably will start moving. Move your hand wheel just to see the gauge. Okay, so this is a good gauge for me. I want it to be relatively wide, and I want the needle to go down in the fabric, and then I want it to go on the outside of the fabric, or just right on the edge, to finish and encasing all of this. So when I'm ready to go, I pop my foot down, and you can see how at the moment I'm keeping aligned the edge of the fabric with just the edge of this hole here. A lot of presser feet will have some kind of extension here. In this case, I've got a clear plastic guide, so I can just line up my fabric against the metal and the plastic guide. If you don't have that, just keep concentrating on just having the fabric lining up here. When you're done, just clip your threads. You might want to snip off any little fray bits. So if you wash it a couple of times, you might still have a tiny little bit of fraying. But after that, you should have a nice, neat, finished edge. So any stray bits you can clip off, and that will protect your garment. Really nice, and you'll get plenty of years of wear from that. Okay, one more technique that you can use is stitching and turning your seam. So what you want to do is iron your seam under, your seam allowance under, just a few millimeters. And you're just turning it under as you go. Okay. Sewing from the top, so with the iron under bit you want to have facing this needle plate. You're going to sew very close to the edge of the fabric, just in a straight stitch. So again, at the moment, I'm aligning my fabric edge close to the edge of this hole in the needle, in the presser foot. Okay. You can see how here I'm catching the turned under edge underneath, and I've got a nice stitch at the top. So it's just a lovely, neat finish that you can apply to both sides of the seam, especially if it's a seam that shows. Okay, so that was your straight seam with the 3 different seam finishes. We used the pink seam, we used the zigzag seam, or we turned under the edge and stitched over it with a straight stitch. Next we're going to move on to a French seam and a lapped seam.